I'm not very fond of, if you watch YouTube videos or anything like that, the like the jumpiness. Like we just take out all of the everyday. I think a podcast should emulate everyday conversation, and that comes with reflective pauses, that comes with thoughts, that comes with I'm contemplating what you said, and I'm not very fond of doing this choppy, so I don't really do a whole lot of editing in this, and that's good. I usually put a little bit of intro on it and that kind of stuff, but if there is something that does need to be cut out for one reason or the other, then that definitely is something that can happen. So to give the listener or viewer, depending on how you're consuming your content, a little bit of background, I was introduced to, and I'll give you guys the opportunity to introduce yourselves here in a second, but I was introduced primarily and firstly through Cheryl and Kendall through a previous guest that was on here, Tara. Now, she and her husband are co-owners, and they run a company called Total Glass, and she happens to run the subcontractor project. And you can go over it. I'll have a link to that in the description. But the gist of it is we've got a problem with the way payments are being made. And a large part, this is in the construction industry, but the way that payments are being made, and then that also backs up to the way contracts are written. And that is the genesis, the gist, if you will, of how Tara and I, in our initial conversation, kind of became, and then she was talking to me about Fairbuild, which I'll let you guys obviously elaborate on throughout the podcast. But that's how we got to where we're at today. And I'm very excited to hear not just we had a prelim conversation, but I'm excited for you to be able to share your own individual stories about how you got into where you're at today. And the reason why is because I met Tara at what we called is a thing called BFA, Business Fundamentals Academy. And it was like a 4.5-day crash course of, okay, you want to start a business? Well, here's you don't know what you don't know. Here's what you don't know. And it's just a smorgasbord. It's just an enormous amount. Drinking from a fire hose. It talks about insurance and marketing, and contracts, of course, was a piece of it too. And at the end of the day, I had a good friend who used to like to say, well, you're the schmuck with the pen. Otherwise, meaning you need to dive down deep into the contracts. But what you guys are, what I'm interested in hearing, and what hopefully the listener will be able to take away, is that you guys understand intuitively that you could be better spending your time elsewhere. In fact, you desperately need to, because sometimes these contracts are written in a pretty slimy way that seem to be entirely one-sided. So, by way of intro, there you go. So, which one of you guys would like to go first and just kind of give a basic introduction before we launch into how you got into this space here?
You want to go first, Cheryl?
Sure. Well, my name is Cheryl Lewis. I have a very long career in very varied background. I'm a CPA and lawyer by background, training, had a number of businesses, and kind of accidentally got into owning a truss and wall panel manufacturing company and framing subcontracting company. And it was, as you talked about, drinking from a fire hose, was definitely that for me. And with my legal background, I was used to looking at contracts. And the first time I got one from a major home builder and one from a GC doing a multifamily project, I was like floored with what I was reading. I never heard of something where you would agree to send somebody millions of dollars worth of completed wall panels and roof panels, or roof trusses, and then get paid if they got paid. It made no sense to me. Indemnity language that was just outrageous. And I was floored. I did not know what to think of it. And when I talked to others in the industry, many of them were saying, well, we just sign it because we have to. We need the work. Others would push back. But it really showed me there was an issue out there that needed to be addressed, because we were seeing the people least able to be a bank, the subcontractors and suppliers being banks. And along the way, I met Kendall Hoyd, and Kendall, tremendous experience in the industry, and he could tell you all about that, but lots more than I had. And Kendall was working on this great project called Fairbuild AI, which was an AI driven contract review platform specifically educated, training the AI to look for the issues that subcontractors and material suppliers run into that are one sided on the favor of the GC, and help them understand what it was they were being asked to sign, and then how they might change that language and offer alternative language that would be fair to them. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. It's exactly what, and frankly, I needed it less than most people because at least I understood the legal aspects. But I would have used it in a second, because you get a 40-page contract that's dense in legal jargon, and you're busy and you have other things to worry about. The last thing you need to do is work through that mind-numbing nonsense. And so I thought it would have been good for me and great for the industry. So that's how I got involved. I love working on this. I think it's a mission. It's not just a business. It's truly a mission. And working with Kendall, I know that's how he feels too. And I'm going to turn it over to him.
Hey, thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so similar origin story. I'm going to go back a little further. My dad was a framer when I was a kid. I've been on his job. I was on his job sites my entire childhood. He eventually became a home builder when I got into high school, and so and then I went and got a degree in finance. But my first job out of college was at Morrison Knudsen, which was one of the big international construction firms of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I worked there for about 10 years, and through a series of random events, ended up working at a small truss manufacturer in southwestern Idaho. And after a couple of years as its sort of, I guess you'd call it CFO, I became president of that company and part owner. And as I started, we were, part of my strategy was to do bigger projects and grow revenue that way. We started seeing these agreements from general contractors that had these stunningly one-sided, drafting to that. And I think you alluded to this point earlier. I know Cheryl did, but when you were running a business like that, you don't have a lot of time to spend 4 hours with your head buried in a document. Things are going on around you at a rapid and sometimes crucial pace. Yeah. And so what happened to me was I kind of fell back into what people who didn't have a lot of experience reviewing agreements did, which is I didn't review them very well. I got to where I was kind of skimming them. I was looking for certain things that I would not agree to, but I didn't really spend as much time as I should. And over the course of maybe like my third and fourth years in that role, I just got taken to the woodshed by a couple of general contractors, on jobs where, had I been more careful with what I signed, my rights would have been much better protected than they were. And so I felt this pain from two sides. One is the pain of not having done a good job negotiating the agreement and getting, serious financial consequences because of it. Mm-hmm. After that, I started reviewing agreements very carefully, but that's got its own kind of pain in that it takes hours to do it. And it's something that first of all, it's drudgery. And secondly, if you're running a business that's, if you're running a business that's small enough to be called a construction subcontractor, in the $20 to $50 million range, you are busy and you don't have time for things like that, right? Because you're wearing a lot of hats and you're keeping a lot of plates spinning, and it's painful all around. So that is the underlying, sort of motivation for Fairbuild. Once ChatGPT came out and I saw what it could do, I started talking to some friends of mine that knew AI and development. That was how they made their living. We agreed that this is something we could build, and we set about building it.
Excellent. Excellent. So around what time was that?
For me, it was the when did we just start building Fairbuild?
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been late 23, early 24.
Because I was on your website earlier and I was looking under the news and how that I was a pretty flabbergasted actually to discover that there was a study at MIT that was like 95% of all AI is like there's no ROI. Contrasting that, of course, with Fairbuild. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then it said that I think it was November of 25. You guys, I think you started out with like, it was a supplier. Is that how I understand it? It was a supplier contract, and then it went to subcontractors in like November. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so you haven't had like enormous amounts of time to implement this, but I strongly suspect that there are plenty of cases where people have reached back out and said, "Oh my gosh, you guys have been a lifesaver and a time saver for me."
Definitely, and definitely both. But I think it's so many things, not just a time saver and a lifesaver. We're also an educator, and what I've found is that one of the things about this industry is it's multi-generational, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of people are turning their businesses over to their children or younger people in their organizations, and they're finding that all this institutional knowledge is right up here in somebody's head about contracts. So even if they've done a good job, they don't have a lot of this on paper. They don't have an SOP out there to hand to somebody and say, this is what you do when it comes to contracts. And so they're going to have to educate somebody. Well, people are telling me how much this has helped them because they can turn it over to whoever's going to do it in the future. And we literally say, I mean, it goes through and says, hey, this is an issue. It may not be something that you're going to push back on, but it's something you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And you can mitigate your risk as a result. So there's so many different layers to what we bring to the table. Whether it's that we bring expertise that's not within your organization and we help you to gain that expertise. We save you time so that if somebody says, I need you to sign this in the next 48 hours, or somebody else is going to get this job, and it's a 40-page contract, you can upload this and literally be seeing the proposed alternative language and the issues within minutes. And those are the kinds of things that people are so grateful for. So that's the feedback I get all the time, is not just that it's really great and all that, but what it's helping them to do to create a better foundation for their businesses.
Yeah, I think that is probably the most that's one of the three, I think, major sort of categories of response that we get back. The other two are, one of them is people telling us that, like I mentioned, that this just saves me so much time that
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm getting better agreements than I ever have because I'm able to be more thorough than I even knew how to be before, but it's taking me less time. And the other one, which is, I think this is the most inspiring for me, is when we have a few customers that have told us, like, this just, we've never negotiated our agreements before. This has changed our relationship with our customers. It's changed our confidence in how we go about doing these projects and how we interact with general contractors. And that one makes me feel really good.
Well, not just that. I think the other part about that too, Kendall, is not just that it's changed the relationship, it's literally made them look more mature in their business
Mm.
sense. And giving, I think Tara was one of the people who's told me, and I think I actually have a testimonial on the website about her saying, hey, I feel like I'm not just more confident, but they take me more seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great part of that too.
So touching on that last part where, the general contractor, which I'm going to make an assumption here that this largely comes into play with commercial, and then of course an industrial side, far more than residential. But Be that as it may, because there's some very, very large general contractors out there that probably have some boilerplate language that they end up using, but there's so much that just seems to be buried. Um, and while there are let's say general contractors that take subs more seriously because you look more mature, I would imagine there's some form of pushback every now and then from some GCs too.
100%. Yeah, there almost always is. I mean, certainly when you don't ever, like the Rolling Stones said, you don't know, you can't always get what you want, but you can get what you need.
Yeah.
and what
I like
what
that.
what we find is that there a lot of people. I think that a very common misconception is that general contractors won't negotiate these things with subcontractors. I think a lot of people who have not had sort of haven't felt comfortable taking that step with their general contractors have assumed that. I will tell you that my experience is not that.
Oh.
Not that I've won every negotiation or every point that I wanted to get out of an agreement, but I've never gone into a situation where that general contractor didn't take me seriously, didn't take my points seriously, and didn't make a good faith effort to find some way for us to reach an agreement.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is really important is we're not trying to get the perfect agreement, just a better agreement. It's like he said, it's not everything. You're not going to get everything you want, but inevitably you will get some of it, and it will get better. Even if it comes 50% better, that's a lot better than where you started.
Yeah, I happen to agree. And your the educational component that you mentioned earlier is not something that I initially thought about. Primarily, and it should, because it's the realm that I happen to reside in. Being somebody in the trades, but it really does make sense to me because I've seen breakout classes at different places where there's a lot of people in the industry. So the commercial construction industry, and certainly in the industrial, you have this large age, skills, experience gap. You got 30 and younger and 55 and older. That's the makeup, right? So people that are in their 30s and in their 40s that have 15 to 25 years of experience are really rare. So what that means then, as you mentioned earlier, Cheryl, the word institutional knowledge is all up here. Certainly the case. That's also the case with not just how to do the work, but how to run the office side of things. And I've seen breakout sessions where it's attorneys that are giving business owners, like, here's a potential way for you to pass on your business, because there are some that don't have a way to figure, they don't have any way. I hate to say that they're trapped, but they don't have a way to hand the business off. And anything that you can do, in my mind, to lessen the burden, take some work off my plate. And that's where I think this software right here comes into play. Not only does it from going forward, right, and negotiating contracts and that thing, and then also, quite frankly, highlighting not only bad contracts but bad contractors and how they're trying to, you mentioned indemnification too, but also, how do I teach those that are going to take over? How do I bring them up to speed? Right. So the educational component that you mentioned is pretty fascinating because I think it's got a lot of value. And I would say that it has a significant amount of use in the next 10, 15 years as we begin to see this, continual changeover in the industry. Because there's going to be a lot of younger people who are going to find themselves in positions of authority far earlier than what they normally would be in. They're going to lack the experience.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's so much to this. We could talk on this topic for forever. And I think one thing that's really critical too is that everybody is under cost constraints, right? Everybody is worried about how much, and their margins are compressing more and more. And so as a result, anytime they can do something that not only saves time and gets them a better deal, but doesn't cost that much. If you talk about, I don't know if legal fees today run on the low end $250 an hour, on the high end over $1,000 an hour. And if you are going to have somebody review a contract, how long do you think it's going to take them? They're just human beings too, right? So they have to read just like you do. If it's a 40-page contract, and Kendall's probably right, it's a 4-hour job. And that's probably a minimum, 4 hours. So that's $1,000 minimum that if you have your lawyer do it. And then they're going to take 2 to 3 weeks to get it on their schedule, right? Because they have a lot of other work to do. So suddenly you're spending a bunch of money, and depending on how complex it is, that may be just how much time it takes them to review it. Is that 4 hours? And then they've got to give you comments. So maybe they spend another 4 hours because it's complex, and maybe it's a $2,000 deal now, and you've waited 3 weeks for it and the job's gone. Those are, these are the kinds of issues that are out there, and people can't afford that. Today, everybody needs they want as much work as they can get. And so we've tried to make this so accessible and so attainable for anyone by making it very it's basically the most expensive is $200 for a contract based on how many you buy, and it goes down to under $100 per contract. So easy to do, and to get the educational value, to get that institutional knowledge in a bottle type of thing. This is such a no-brainer for anybody that's in business. I mean, it's like, it's a gift on a platter. At least I think that it is. And when we can make something that easy of a decision for somebody, it's more about people just don't know that they need it. They just don't know. They don't know it even exists. And that's where it's so wonderful to work with somebody like you, Rusty, and have them, educate people. What you do every day to educate people is a gift to them. And this is just one of the many gifts that you're putting on the platter for them.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something. Yeah, I really do. I mean, like, that's the thing. I kind of reside in the land of serious, because there are long-term serious ramifications. There's serious ramifications if the industry doesn't take replacing its people seriously. Like, the people call it a Ponzi scheme when you look at Social Security. No, it's a natural progression of things. I need to be training my replacement right now. I need to be training and mentoring and continue to mentor. And we've had this idea that we can just offshore all the stuff. And so this idea that we can just sit back and not do the work. It's like, no, now's the time to really, really, really do the work and focus on it. So I'm kind of, I'm very optimistic about it. And you did mention, so I want to touch on the lawyer thing for just 1 second, because so the contrast is kind of stark to me. You've got people that just tell you, well, we just signed contracts because we just got to have work. But on the other end, you got people who take it seriously enough, at least to some degree, that they have their attorneys look over contracts. How many people have you had come to you that pretty much have cut out attorneys, for the most part, reviewing contracts because of what you're able to provide for them via Fairbuild?
I think that actually, I don't know if there's an exception to this in our customer base. Almost none of them would use lawyers on a regular basis for contract review. They would either suffer the pain of doing it themselves or not do it. And so I don't think we've done much in the way of replacing lawyers.
I'd have to take exception to that, Kendall. There have been people who have told me they've reduced the amount of time they've spent with their lawyers, and I can think of a couple of examples, that they only send to their lawyers now for the things that they look at and go, yeah, that could be a problem. This is telling me it's a problem. I'm getting pushback from the GC. So I think there is a little bit of it.
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to make is that we're not replacing lawyers.
No.
Right.
So what Cheryl's talking about is that there's a technical issue where a lawyer needs to be involved, because Fairbuild is not a lawyer. Fairbuild is an analytical tool provide provide analysis of your agreement. And there are probably situations where I would say that, if I were a user of Fairbuild. I had a particularly large contract that was really big relative to the size of my company or relative to the size of my historical jobs, or a customer that I know is difficult in certain ways. Certainly I think lawyers are going to get brought into those kind of situations.
Yeah.
Fairbuild's not, it's meant to, like Cheryl said earlier, we're going to get you a better agreement. We're going to make sure you don't take any risks that you don't have identified and are aware of. That's really the thrust of Fairbuild.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is that we're reducing the dependence on outside counsel. Whether you use it or not, you may not choose to do it because of the cost or just maybe naivete in some cases, but we will reduce the dependence on it and help you figure out when you really need that help so that it becomes, that's what lawyers want to do. They don't want to read mind-numbing contracts either. They want to be called in for the things that are of consequence. So, I think that this isn't meant to replace it, but it's meant to change the dynamic around legal needs.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get. That's the point it was making. It was like, because if an attorney's if they spend 4 hours reviewing a contract for you, but then they have to spend additional time providing comments on the language that that they can clearly identify or whatever the case may be, then how much money are you spending and how much are you saving? So, but more to your point, Kendall, you brought up that most of the people that, at least that you're aware of, seem to be either they suffered the pain of having to read through that stuff themselves, or they just didn't do it at all, which is its own unique kind of pain, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because there have been some really incendiary things that seem to be wrapped up into the contracts sometimes. And I don't know I'll be curious to hear your perspective about whether or not the industry seems to be adopting a more amenable approach, or is it an approach that it's going to be like a fight tooth and nail over and over and over again to get because there are some things, right? There are some states that have just outright banned pay if paid. They're like, no, we're not doing that. That is nothing. Your relationship as a general contractor, your relationship to your sub is not dependent on whether or not the customer that you're working for pays you. That's not how this is going. But there are some states, I think, that have not outlawed
only 14 have banned. Well, they've made it unenforceable. But here's the point I want to make, because this is it's really critical. Just because it's unenforceable doesn't mean it won't show up in your contract, right, and you won't have to go to court over it. So why let it be in there at all?
That's
pay
right.
Pay if paid is a crazy concept. Pay when paid, however, is mostly enforceable. And that can be just as damaging, because if your pay when paid has a continued performance requirement, you still have in the contract, continued performance, you're suddenly, just because pay if paid is unenforceable doesn't mean you can't be destroyed by a pay when paid clause, if that makes sense. You become a bank, and that margin you have, which may be fairly small, is being eaten away every month by your carrying costs, right? And then if you have to keep performing, even though you're not getting paid because that's in your contract, you've got a cluster. And that is something that I like to point out to people. Just because it's unenforceable doesn't mean it's illegal, right? It's not illegal. You just have to go fight over it. So get rid of it. Don't let it be in there.
Yeah, the underlying philosophy of Fairbuild, we actually, regardless of the state you're in, we're gonna suggest to anyone in any state that they negotiate terms that are equitable. So because in the end, because I think Cheryl alluded to this, and it's something that's not immediately apparent to people who don't do what we do for a living. But you could be right. You still got to go prove you're right in court.
That's right.
You got to pay the costs that go along with that.
Yeah.
And so we want people to not put themselves in that position to begin with.
I'll give you another example of just how looking at your contract is important. And this one is one that gets by people a lot. Jurisdiction. So let's say you're doing a project in Nevada, which is where I live, and the company is domiciled that you're, let's say it's a big home builder, and they're domiciled in Omaha. So they send you a contract that says that this is being governed by Nebraska law and jurisdiction. So that means if you have a lawsuit on a project in Nevada under Nevada code and all those things, but you have to go fight it in Nebraska. How easy is that going to be? Not only do you have the costs of going back and forth to Nebraska for depositions and all that, but you've got to now educate the Nebraska court on Nevada law. Sounds not such a big thing. Guess what? In that case, you are probably either going to take a lot less money than you're owed, or you're going to walk away. Pretty crazy, but this is how these little things show up and can bite you.
Right. You're making some really solid points here. And so I hesitate to put a number on it, but not top 5, but what are the top, because you've already touched on some of them. What are the top most egregious things, or, things that you found in contracts that you're basically pinpointing to people like, you may not get this. You may not, in the spirit of a more equitable contract, what Kendall said, I just want to draw your attention to this. This is something, right, where there's jurisdiction or whatever. What are the top most pinpointed things that generals like to include in their contracts that sometimes they just stroke with a stroke of a pen, sign it, and turn it back over, and they like roll over without a fight. Just what are the top things?
Cheryl and I have overlapping but slightly different lists, interestingly enough, in terms of our hit parade. So I'm going to let her start.
Well, I first need to say, at the end of this, we need to have you put up a code URL to draw people to Kendall's 10 provisions. He has a little guideline that he's put together that you can send to subcontractors. Well, we will send to subcontractors. They can sign up for it. What do you call it? The 10?
It's a subcontractor negotiation guide. But it has the 10 most common ones that he's talked about. I guess I'd put payment terms overall is first. Pay if paid, pay when paid, and then continued performance as part of that pay when paid. Indemnity, absolutely huge one. And actually, one of the things we had a call this morning with an insurance broker. This is a critical one for insurance. If we can get to the point where people can see just how insurance companies can see that we're risk management for them, they don't want you to have these bad indemnity clauses in there, because that can be then you may not even have proper coverage for it, but you definitely don't want indemnity. You don't want to indemnify people for acts that you didn't have any control over. Yeah. And that has been a big issue. They keep pushing all this indemnity down. And in some cases, it's kind of a blanket indemnity, and everybody gets a piece of that indemnity that's worked on the job, whether or not they've had anything to do with it.
I have seen that. I have, not only that, because I don't, get my head into contracts, but I know people who have, who are aware of contract language, and they're like, yeah, I'm not signing that because I'm not going to, and that spreading it all out across all the subs, they're like, nope, not doing it. So.
Yeah. Or it may say something that looks okay because it says something like that you will indemnify any claims that occur in the vicinity of your job. And then suddenly even if it happened a month after you left the job site, but it happened in the vicinity of your work, you could have a claim. Doesn't mean that you will lose it, but you may have to defend the general contractor in that case. And so that can become a big expense and something that your insurance company is going to be very upset about. The other thing is just insurance in general, just making sure you have the right amount of insurance, you have proper insurance, that you don't have any insurance in there required that you don't need, or that is not customary for you, or like surety bonds or anything like that that shouldn't be part of your package, but it's in the contract. You didn't look at it and you don't have that coverage. Suddenly you're in automatic breach, right? So that's one that I think is a big one. Kendall, you want to throw in a couple of your favorites?
Yeah, so I think that another dimension of this, Rusty, that you can't get this right. Uploading your contract to ChatGPT. We spent 2 years. One of my partners in Fairbuild is a longtime construction attorney. Cheryl is both a former subcontractor and former attorney, and I, who have almost 40 years of construction experience. A lot of it as an owner or a CEO of a subcontracting firm. We spent 2 years working on axioms that are not just legal axioms that we apply to these agreements, but also business axioms. So some examples of those would be like schedule control. Every one of these agreements that you get comes out and says, we'll change the schedule when we want to, and you'll respond accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, there's a couple things about that, I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing to think about giving up anyway. But if you look at the way labor is now, a subcontractor just can't throw bodies at these things anymore. Like if you get accelerated by 50%, you're probably going to end up with a lot of overtime. And in most of these agreements, you're going to eat it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of them. Another one is price duration. So we saw this, in when in the COVID times, when people signed agreements that said they thought the contract was going to be 18 months, and during 18 months they could absorb what is a normal amount of material price variation. Well, now we live in a world where variation is not normal, and that started with COVID, but it didn't end there.
No.
Right.
And so that's another one where Fairbuild is trained to identify when you're being asked to hold your price indefinitely, and to make sure that you're aware of it. So those are two issues where it's a business issue, not necessarily a lawyer issue, not necessarily one that a lawyer would even pick up, but as somebody who's entering into those obligations, you need to be aware of them.
And I think tied on to that too would be the force majeure. I mean, I don't think many people think of force majeure as something that they'd even, consider. But that is basically, I don't know if you're familiar with it, basically it says if there is something that happens, whether it's an act of God or a tariff or something of that nature, like COVID, that occurs, you will be able to terminate your contract, or you will be able to have some sort of, most cases it says that you're given extra time, and both parties will have that. And in some cases it allows you to terminate if you can't, if you can't even complete the contract, which you've had an earthquake and you can't complete it. But force majeure is just a legal thing that most people didn't even think about until COVID. It was there, but most people didn't consider it too much until COVID came along. And that brings in that price escalation that he's talking about, but it goes beyond that.
Yeah. COVID, I think, probably changed a lot. I think it probably gave a lot of people a wake-up call in a lot of ways. You see it all the time when it comes to pricing anyway, right? Someone gives you a quote, you go out and get a quote for raw materials, whether it's steel or whatever, and they'll tell you in some line item in there, hey, look, this quote is good for X amount of days, this time period, this is not, because we don't know the price of things down the line. Right. And it doesn't surprise me that there would be language in a contract that would say you're going to hold to the price that you gave me no matter. Did you use the word indefinitely, Kendall, earlier?
Yeah, it's open-ended.
Yeah, never ending. You might have a catastrophe, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is what you gave it to me, and this is the contract that you signed. And I think that's the point that's one of the points that I really want to plant the flag on, is that at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is before you put your name on this, unenforceable or not, before you put your name on this, to actually know what it is that you're signing, to know what it is that you are committing yourself to. Whether it is, holding to, and that seems like a small thing, really, right? Whether you're holding yourself to the material costs that you quoted 2 years ago, or where the material has, gone up 30% in that same time period. Or, and the big one, I think, is not pay if paid, but I think the one is that sneaks by because a lot of people don't even think about it. I've heard this discussed plenty of times is, oh, you think you can walk off the job? No, no, you can't. You've signed the contract that basically stipulates you, and it's an accurate assessment to say that you're basically you're forcing the subcontractors to finance the project. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. That's 100% what you're doing. So if you're listening or watching and you're actively interested, because there's a lot of people who like the idea of having, starting your own business. If you're interested in doing that, you need to know what you don't know and get comfortable with being able to say, I don't know what I don't know. And one of them is how important contracts are. And if you ask me how narrow the discipline turns out to be, I think I mentioned this in our prelim call because you mentioned insurance, and I wanted to piggyback off of that about just how specialized the construction industry is when it comes to insurance. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense to me that this is right in the very beginning of when we started this off, how specialized construction contracts are as compared to any other contract that you're going to sign. Like, you don't see some of the language that finds its way into construction contracts anywhere else. And same thing with the insurance. I mean, you could sit down and listen to a guy that I told you this in our prelim call. There was a guy that, you have an insurance guy as an insurance broker, and he's selling all kinds of insurance. I mean, you name it, you need it. He can, those guys sell it. He was doing that and stopped and specifically started focusing on construction industry, and all the other insurance, guys are like, you're crazy, man, this and that, whatever. And anyway, what he ended up doing was turning it into a humongous business. Why? Because the demand was there, because the needs to highlight the specialized construction, and you go to read your contract, and your contract is telling you that you're supposed to carry this kind of insurance, and your generalized insurance guy doesn't even know what that is. And so they're missing it. Attorneys are missing it. And so to distill it all down and to discover that there's a tool that you can put your 40, 50, 60 page contract that has the very real ability to bankrupt you if you don't know what you're doing and paying attention, and then to turn around and tell you this and this and this and this and this. These are things that you want to pay attention to. You might want an equitable contract is what you said earlier, Kendall. You may not get all, to quote the Rolling Stones again, right? You may not get everything you want, but you can get what you need. And I think that's a fantastic tool. And it really just kind of opens your eyes to, oh, wow, I don't know what I don't know.
Can I make another point?
We would have made that our motto, but we'd have to pay a lot of money for the Rolling Stones.
Can I make another point? Because you said something about AI, and I think this is critical. So, and Kendall talked about when ChatGPT came out, it gave him this sense of. But the point about ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, all good tools. I use them. I find them really useful in certain places. But you remember that MIT study you talked about?
Yeah.
The problem that they were able to identify is that the reason 95% of those projects are unsuccessful and don't provide any ROI is that they try to use a general tool to cover a very specialized group of problems. And so the difference in what we've done is that we took a wonderful tool, the AI tool, and we said, okay, here is a closed environment, and we're going to train this AI to respond to these problems. We've taught them these axioms. We've taught it these axioms. We've taught it how to respond to these issues. And we don't allow any other input coming in to muddy up the water. Does that make sense?
Oh
Because
yeah.
that's what happens with the AI. It starts to hallucinate, bring in false information. Now, I think it's gotten much better, but it doesn't know how to respond to these issues. It's going to say, well, this is a problem or this is an issue for the industry, but it doesn't differentiate between whether you're the GC or the supplier or the
Right.
subcontractor. It doesn't know how to do that. And I think that's why this is such a specialized tool and why the MIT study is so critical and why we put it on our website, because it does identify this issue. You need to train it. It needs to learn what you want it to respond to.
Well, I'm a big fan of, the pendulum swings all the time, right? It swings in the way that, from we were very task oriented way back when, not thinking about people. And then the pendulum swings too far, if you ask me, to relational. But I've got a task to get done. So hopefully the pendulum is starting to right itself to where I do have to get a task done, but I also don't need to scream my head off at the people that are doing the work so that I could, I'm taking care of the people as well. And this also happens, I think, in this. We had people who were doing the work, whether they were, reading contracts or whatever, and we saw the pendulum swing from a very specific, intentional focus to what we're doing as far as, there's that, and then we want to go to this, jack of all trades, master of none. But what happens in my estimation is that when you focus on that, you lose some of that institutional knowledge when you're working with your hands, because we don't want to discount the masters of who their trades are. And I think that's what's going on with the AI. This master, jack of all trades, master of none, AI muddies the water to some degree because it pulls from all kinds of different sources. Whereas you're going, I want to narrow this focus down. This is the point that I want. I'm teaching you and I've taught you to look for specific language and from a subcontractor's perspective. And it's I'm getting into the master part of that. If that makes if that analogy makes any sense.
A really good analogy. Good analogy.
Because that's where I think the pendulum is coming back to. I think the pendulum is starting to come back to, okay, we're starting to put a lot more value on people who are masters of their trade. One of the reasons why is because of the sheer shortage of people. Kendall, you talked about earlier having contract language where, we may have to accelerate the schedule. You signed onto it. And if we tell you this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, where are you going to find those people? Right. Everybody who's worth their weight is working, and they're going to stay working. Unless you have like some kind of worldwide economic collapse, they're going to stay working. And the reason why is because they're so rare. And so I think that this narrow focus of contractor, like these are the parameters where you're going to go. I've trained you to do this. We're looking to be like the masters in our AI field, if you will, not trying to be very general, very broad. And I commend you on that because I think you've kind of stumbled on the secret sauce, if you will. So
yeah, I think that what I've learned in deeply immersing myself in using AI to develop this tool and to do other parts of my work is I realized that the more I know about something, the more obvious its frailties and its weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And so so I think that it's like Cheryl said, it's an extremely impressive technological accomplishment, but you shouldn't take that to mean that it knows everything, right, to the depth of an expert, because it just doesn't. And it can get you kind of a elementary school primer on about anything, but does that put you in a position to where you might decide whether it's going to take if you're going to take significant risks with your company based on what it says? I don't know that that's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah,
unless it's been trained to do it, which is to respond to your needs. Yeah.
Right. And that's it's kind of funny because in that study on your website, it was 95% like companies are heavily investing. And I just saw an article. It was, I might have seen it yesterday. Maybe it was 2 days ago or 3 days ago. One of them. And I think it was Ford. I think it was Ford that was bringing back a lot of did you see it too? You're nodding your head.
Did. Yep.
because they're
Yep. I
bringing
saw it.
back all of they're like, I think it was like 300 different engineers or whatever, because they found out that AI, not only did it not save them any money, but it caused them a lot of problems. And I thought, well, that's interesting,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. Yeah. It's if you want to put it in construction site terms, it's an apprentice. At all these things that some people want to have it do a journeyman's job, and
Yeah.
it's not qualified for it. And that's what we've done with Fairbuild, is give it the journeyman's training so that
Yeah.
it can operate at that level.
That's a really good, I like the way you put that. That's a good analogy. Okay. So when I think of the educational component that you talked about earlier, Cheryl, I find my initial thoughts were, and I like the educational component, but my initial thoughts always went to time saving right out the get go, just because I've talked to so many people over the course of my entire career who will, have no problem telling me, and I know it intuitively myself, I don't have enough time to do what I need to do. I never have enough time to do what I need to do. And the number of people who are adept at being able to help me do more of what I know I need to do in the construction side of the business is dwindling. Even with all the chatter that's out there, from individuals who are feeling a little insecure about their jobs because of AI and blah 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 blah, and they have this, they think that the trades are this great white hope or whatever. I still don't have enough time to do what I need to do, and I don't have enough time to train them either. So when it comes to time saving, uh, I'm sure you've got some testimonials from people just talking about how much time it has actually saved them on their day to day, week to week, month to month time.
Yeah, I think Tara's a perfect example. She's a big fan, as obviously she told you about it, but it's saving her a ton of time because she's able, and giving her confidence and giving her skills. And she's an example of somebody who came into the industry fairly recently. She was a school teacher and kind
Yeah.
of came into this industry fairly recently, so she didn't have that institutional knowledge. But now she's going in confidently into meetings and she's reviewing a contract in much less time than it would take her if she had to start from scratch and learn all of these various things. But also, we have people who have been doing this for years. I had one guy who, I mean, he had more knowledge of contracts than I'll probably ever have in terms of specific construction contracts. And he said, this is saving me so much money, or so much time, because I can look at it and quickly find the issues that I particularly care about. Like, we actually have it so you can filter by issue. You could say, I only want to look at indemnity issues, or I only want to look at,
Wow.
those specific issues. So, but on the other hand, I think Kendall said one person told him that it was taking him more time because he was learning. He wasn't so used to looking at contracts. And so I think that's what you told me. It was correct.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Yep.
now saying, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. This is teaching me. So it's
Uh-huh.
both. It can take additional time because you're investing more time than you ever would before. And you might have signed things you shouldn't have. On the other hand, for people, a lot of people, it's saving them a ton of time because it's helping them identify the issues that matter most. If that makes, I don't know if that's too confusing, but I hope that makes sense.
I think it's fair to say that the people in the trade, that run these trade subcontracting companies that do review their agreements, more often than not, it's the owner of the company that does it. And, as long as we're talking about companies like, say, 50 million revenue and below, and maybe 100 million and below, but they almost always take this. They all take the same approach. They've identified their top 7, 8, 10 issues that that are kind of like deal breakers for them if they don't get the right wording. They'll go through a contract. They'll look for those particular things, and they'll negotiate them where they find offending language. And I would say that if you can set up Fairbuild to identify if you've got, let's say, 10 in your list of potential deal breakers, you can set up Fairbuild to present you only those 10 issues out of your contract. And the time it will take you to go through, find those, select your the language that you want to try to negotiate into the agreement and create the red line. I would say Fairbuild would turn that whole exercise into 45 minutes or an hour, and maybe less. And and you might spend 4 or 5 hours on that, because the other thing about this is once you can negotiate it, you can go through and review it, analyze it, come up with your negotiating points. You still got to create a red line, that's not nothing, to actually create the document.
Which we do now. It just pops it out.
Yeah, so we're probably like we probably collapse the time it takes to do that level of review, which is what I think most of the people in our industry, subcontractors in our industry who do review agreements, do it that way. We save 75% of the time, maybe, something like that. But on the other hand, to Cheryl's point, if you're curious about the other things you're signing up for, you might actually, for a while, you might be taking more time, but you're going to learn things about your exposure and your risk accumulation that you didn't know before.
And you might assume that would be somebody who's only been doing it for a short time. I've literally had people who I know have been in the industry for 35 and 40 years say they never reviewed a contract at that level and that they were shocked at some of the things that they were finding. Because
I would doubt
frankly, this is the other thing. GCs get smarter and smarter, right? Because they see, oh, here's another thing I could add, or their lawyers do, and they add it. And then if you haven't reviewed that contract or at least compared 1 year to the next, you might find you signed something that has new language. And I'll give you an example. Somebody brought this to us. There's something, where you get preferred pricing is something that has happened. Like if I have a contract with you and your pricing gets better, I'm going to get that better pricing. So that's preferential pricing, right? Always get rid of that. But there's a new thing, and that's preferred delivery or production. So this has been kind of added in. It's like 5 words in a contract, in a very long contract. And somebody brought it to me and said, hey, have you seen this? And it was a national home builder. And if you signed that, you could be required to, as Kendall said before, not just accelerate your schedule, but actually put them ahead of anybody else in delivering product or at their whim. And so suddenly you might be in breach of other contracts because you're suddenly having to put them in front. That's new language in this contract. And if you hadn't compared the two, you might not know that. And suddenly they could enforce that and you could be up a creek.
Wow. That's, that's crazy. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. But if you can get away with it, why wouldn't you? If you were a GC.
Yeah. So I think the common thread to me is people get away with what they get away with because people allow them to get away with what they get away with. That's really what it boils down to. So the more you're aware, the more contractors push back, the more they say, I'm not signing this because I know what this means and I'm not going to, I don't want to be up the creek without a paddle. Like I'm aware of this. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Wow. Okay. So you mentioned earlier the breakdown. Like you can go on the website, you can upload your document, and then you can filter out. Like you could say, okay, I only want indemnification is one of the things that you mentioned. How many specific focuses do you guys have? Like how many can you tailor it to?
We are constantly sort of adding to or combining axioms to get maximum efficiency out of the model, but it's right around 50. So there are 50 areas where we've identified that the risk transfer is unfair is common enough that we built it into our model.
50.
And so we have it so you can filter them according to low, medium, and high risk. So you might say on high risk, you might say, I only care about indemnity and insurance and schedule changes and payment terms. And you might click those, but the others you could say, well, some of them are medium risk, some of them are low risk under your own mindset, right? And then you could just run it to show only the high risk ones, only the medium risk ones, and only the low risk ones.
Wow, 50. Just so, to add emphasis to that, 50 things. You've got people who are building a language model take a look at contracts, identify 50 items or 50 things that could make it unfair that you might be signing a contract. And so if you're not, delving into contracts, or you're just one of those ones that just pencil whip the thing and send it back in, that's a lot of risk. That's an awful lot of risk there.
Yeah, it's you're completely exposed at that point. You're at the mercy. If one thing starts to go sideways in your execution of that work, you're at the mercy of your customer in that situation.
Wow.
And what doesn't make a lot of sense about that to me, Rusty, is it's like, wouldn't you want the people who provide you the best service and you need them in order to, to do your business? Wouldn't you want them to be successful? You wouldn't want to put them out of business. And they don't necessarily want to put you out of business until they do, until something goes wrong and they need to push something down further and further. They've messed up. They need more, they don't have good cash flow. They're in trouble. The job's gone badly. They're going to look for somebody to push it down to. You just don't want to be them.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I need you to be able to do this job for me, but when something goes wrong, I need somebody I can point the finger at.
Yeah,
and if I've got the I've got the contract signed, then I can legally go, yeah, I'm gonna put it on you. I'm gonna point that finger right at you. I'm gonna shove it all off on you. And like the CIA used to have a kite program, like where they would have operatives, right? And if things went bad, to cut the kite string, you're on your own. Like that's what it sounds like with the contract language, right? Yeah, I've got this contract over here, but something went wrong. Yep, cut the string. You're a kite. You're on your own now. And that's where and that's certainly one of the things when it comes to contracts and indemnification stuff. From an OSHA perspective too, because on your multi-employer job sites, they're going to hold the sub, but they're looking to also talk to the general contractor, because ultimately the way OSHA views it, the general contractor is ultimately responsible. And so, there's a lot of contracts just have a lot of stickiness. It's just really sticky stuff. And you're completely vulnerable. You're completely at risk, like you said, Kendall.
Or sticky?
Sticky. Sticky.
Being facetious.
Yeah, sticky. I mean,
stinky too.
Stinky too. Yeah. Well, you know what? We'll go there because I want to know. Because I was toiling around this. What is the worst contract that you have seen? I'm sure you guys in the time, not just the time that you put stuff through Fairbuild, but you can also extend it back to like where you're like, okay, this is like when you elected to like, all right, I'm going to build Fairbuild. It could be like the absolute worst contract that just popped in your mind going, that's the driving force why I'm going to make this.
The one that the general contractor would not budge on. That's the worst one.
The one that they won't budge on any of the language.
Won't budge. If they won't budge, there's a bigger problem. I mean, wouldn't you say that, Kendall?
Yeah, I mean, the worst one I've ever seen was I was running a roofing company in California up until recently, and till this got going, and I decided to ride this particular horse, but it's from a big general contractor back east. It was a public works deal for it was like a housing project on the university's campus. And it was the agreement itself, a subcontractor agreement, which they can be as short as 15 pages or so. This one was probably 55 pages.
Wow.
And it was, I'm not a spring chicken. I've seen a lot of these things. It had everything I've ever seen in it, and then some. And I don't really want to name the contractor because that's probably I don't know if that's fair, but
Right.
but as somebody, it was a big GC from back east that all the things that we've talked about today, it had them in spades. There's so one of the other things that we didn't talk about, and this is just an example, your indemnity to them also included what is called consequential damages, which in the case of a housing project, if you are deemed to be the one who caused, call it a 1 month delay of getting that thing up and running, if you have consequential damages, you're going to be responsible for 1 month of rent for the whole building.
Mm.
Along with and the worst part about that is you're not insured for that in most cases. Most people don't have insurance that will cover that kind of damage claim.
That's right.
And so so they can be really, really bad. And this one, that was an example where I think I just did a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. There are actually 6 different places where in a contract where it's like possible, even common for general contractors to sneak in indemnity language. So you might think you've negotiated the indemnity away because you found and negotiated the one that's in the section called indemnity, but there are 5 other places where they might have gotten you to sign up for one if you didn't look for it.
Yeah, if you weren't in depth and I'm going to take a fine tooth comb and go through this. I think I was talking to you all in the prelim about, I don't know if it was indemnification language, but it was a certain thing that somebody wanted to negotiate out of a contract. And then it was like a 1-sentence thing buried in some obscure paragraph. And it was like whatever, contract language that this person has negotiated is null and void or something sneaky like that. And I thought, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Notwithstanding anything to the contrary within this contract, that's what you'll see.
Yeah. It can say, any negotiating that's gone on that's not incorporated in this exact agreement is null and void. So you might think you made an agreement on an addendum like that, something like that with your customer.
Yeah.
And that lawyer has already, nullified it.
Yeah. Found a way to, and that's what they're paid to do, right? You're providing you're providing a more level playing field for the subs.
Yep.
And saving them time as well. It's a wonderful. I like the concept. I really, really like the concept, and the educational component. The more we talk about this, the more the light bulb goes off, because it's like you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so I think there's going to be a lot of use out of this model. I really think so. I can see it just taking off and being used. Unless you got somebody, and there's always going to be people who are like cowboys that just take all kinds of risks, but that doesn't make much sense to me. We don't have enough time. We got to look at jobs. We got to bid jobs. We have to plan them. We have to execute them, right? We have to take care of all this sort of stuff. And then of course, then of course there is I have to go out and chase my money. I have heard from business owners talking about how I'll spend, some of them spend 2-3 days, 2, 3, 4, 5 days a month just having to get people to give me my money that it's rightfully owed to me. Give me my money, which was one of the reasons why our mutual friend Tara is, kind of starting the subcontractor project, because if there's been nothing going on with what we've got going on here, give me my money in net 30, be done with it. Stop with the bull crap. So I think it takes a lot of people just to start raising awareness of the contractual problems, which hopefully anybody that is listening or viewing this understands or is beginning to grasp, if you have not, the contractual language problem that is very evident in the construction industry. And then you begin to learn even more. But then the end result is to obviously not just learn more, it's also to provide that pushback. So more and more and more people come to a more level playing field, and you can begin to try and cut the nonsense out of what we have going on here when it comes to what's going on with unfair contract language.
Yeah,
because there's some really
exactly
unfair
right.
contract.
Because the real weakness in the strategy, and right now, the weak link in the chain is that if the general contractor doesn't want to negotiate, they probably can find somebody who won't ask them to. And who's your competition if you're a subcontractor?
Mm.
And we really want to change that. We think that we've made this affordable. A company of any size can use this software effectively, and if the general contractors are no longer comfortable that they just go to the next guy on the bid list and they don't have to have a contract negotiation, then everything changes.
Right. Then then they have all the power.
Right.
Well, my point before when I said that the worst contract is the one that somebody won't negotiate. The point is there that if they're going to just go find somebody else to do it, they don't value a good relationship with a good vendor. They're
right.
just looking for
That's right.
bottom feeders, or they're looking for somebody who's gullible enough to just jump in and they're trying to push that risk down. They're not trying to be responsible business people. At least that's my interpretation. If somebody won't even negotiate with me and won't hear me out on what these issues are, when they know that these things are pretty one-sided, and they're not stupid. So that's one I think is dangerous. I want to walk away from that because I figure if I have trouble negotiating with them now, what is it going to be like if we do have a problem? It's going to be horrible. So
I think you're absolutely right. It's the managing director. He and I are really, really good friends, and he's got a statement. Sometimes the best job is the one you don't want, is the one you don't get.
Walk away from.
But yeah, you don't. That's it right there. The best job sometimes is the one that you don't get. You don't want it. I don't want that job. I don't like if the first thing you're doing is what do you cost? What's your man hour price? What's your man hour price? What do you cost? It's like maybe this is not the right relationship for us. And your point is well taken, right? If you're completely inflexible when it comes to this language right now, how are you going to be when we really do have a problem? Right now, we're just talking about what's in the contract. It's just language, and so sometimes, to amend that quote, sometimes the best general contractor is the one. Sometimes working with the best general contractor, like I don't want to work with that one, because of their inflexibility of dealing with the contractual language. And to be honest with you, there are contractors like that.
Yeah.
I know in my area here, it was kind of I heard about it. I was a young kid at the time, but there were some general contractors that, because of contract language and the way they would do things and whatnot, they would get some of the subs over, kind of bent over a barrel, if you will, and then get them to settle for pennies on the dollar because they needed the money. Right. And that's a pretty crappy way of doing business. But guess what? That sub signed that contract. I'm not saying it's ethical at all or moral, but they signed the contract. And maybe if they would have had a tool, to be able to evaluate the contract language, to at least go in with a fight, right? I got a sword, strapped to my waist. I'm ready to at least be able to use it. And so I think your point about sometimes, the contractor that will not flex at all. I'm sure there are some out there. I'm sure that there are some out there. And they
the way I describe it is it's bare knuckle commerce. You're
bare knuckle commerce. I love it.
Yeah. So don't walk into the ring with your hands at your sides.
That's hilarious. I'm coming into this with 10 rounds and you just walking in there. So in other words, the general, that's hilarious. So the general contractor's coming in, they're ready to go 12 rounds and you just got your hands down like, am I sparring here? What am I doing here? Like, that's funny.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Contracts matter. At the end of the day, the contracts matter. And we have contracts for everything. And I think that that there are a lot of people who take the, there's so many contracts out there today that people just go, I accept the rules and just check a box, and I acknowledge your terms and conditions and I check a box, and we don't take the time to read it and all this kind of stuff. And And, in particular, construction contracts can be very convoluted with very, lawyer jargon that the average individual is like, what does that even mean? And yet here there is an AI tool that has been built, a very focused one, remember, that you could just put it in there and say, talk to me about indemnification, show me about this, whatever it happens to be, 50 items, 50 areas, right? To 50 different things that are built in. And it could just like you snap a finger, it looks into those things. I just think that it's a fantastic tool. And for someone like Tara, who is very tenacious about what she wants to get done, if she has said that this is a good thing, that she finds a lot of value in it, there's a lot of value in it. Not just based upon what you guys are telling me, which I'm willing, So if you're looking for a faster way to, you want to spend more time, regrettably chasing your money and not having to bury your head in a contract, then I think that Fairbuild is definitely something that individuals should be taking a nice hard look at, because anything to save you time nowadays, anything to save you time and headache, like it's a lot of stress. I have in that Business Fundamentals Academy that I was mentioning earlier, where they go in a 4.5 day crash course about all the different things that we talked to you about. There's a wonderful presenter. She is a wealth of knowledge. And one of the things that she says is she compares the construction industry to your company to like a baby that never grows up. She said it's a baby that never grows up. And if that's the case, which I think she's absolutely right, if that's the case, one more thing that you can just take off your plate is reviewing contracts, at least to the depth that it used to be. Hopefully you're not, if you're a listener or a watcher and you're just pencil whipping it, you might seriously want to think about just how much risk you're taking on yourself. So is there anything that I did not cover via questions or whatever that either one of you want to make sure? Because I want to make sure you have your full opportunity to interject. Some people have their own pet points, right? So if there's something that I did not touch on, or something that you find that's more important that needs a little bit more covering, I would ask that you go ahead and take the time to address any of those issues that I might have missed.
I think that I think there was a really, really good conversation, and I thought it hit on a lot of really salient, really the essence of Fairbuild. What I think we want to emphasize here at the end is this is a mission for us. Like we like Tara so much because she's trying to start a movement.
Yeah.
And she came into this business from being a teacher. Yeah. And so she started asking questions that other people aren't asking.
Yeah.
And and so we think that the construction industry as a whole will be better. We think that construction costs will go down because the companies are more stable when we have a level playing field with these agreements. And so our mission is we want to change that. We want to change that little piece of the world.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I think that starting a movement is a good way to put that. I think that that's what needs to happen. I mean, there's an old saying, no army can withstand an idea whose time has come.
That's right.
Right. So a level playing field, where subcontractors are, and you bring up costs going down. If you have to change the way that the construction industry, for the most part, if you have to change the way that things are done, and there's some heavy lifting involved, but what you find out on the other side of this is that the costs go down because the contractors are they're more, they have a lot more cash flow to themselves. They don't feel the constraints as much. They have some leeway, if you will, which makes sense to me because Tara mentioned that, within her internal conversations that, once you get above, I think she said 5 to 10 million or above, it gets easier. And the reason why is obviously because you would have a little more in the bank. So you don't feel that strapping flow. It just feels like the deck is stacked against a lot of subs. And when you get somebody that's fresh and, from some different industry like you did, Cheryl, when you first got in, and you go, what is this? You start taking a fresh look at this. You're going, you're not like this far into it. You're looking at it and going, I've never seen language like this. What does this mean? This doesn't make any sense. They have the fresh eyes, fresh perspective. So hopefully that movement, as you stated it becomes something that's really catchy, because I think that there's a lot, if we're talking about it, there's a lot of other people who aren't, but it's on their mind. It's definitely on their mind. So, all right. Well, look, I think it's a pretty good place to stop. I really appreciate the time that you guys have taken to, kind of talk with me about what you got going on, your pain points, some of the things, having, contracts that were one-sided that, got you started on this. And then, of course, talking about Fairbuild and how it's not a generalized AI that can pull in erroneous information. It's a very narrow focused. And I think that's where it really shines, right? You got people backing it that have made it very narrow focused on the construction industry. And here's 50 different things that you could be looking for. I think it's a fantastic idea and product. I do have some people that I want to get you guys in touch with. Hopefully that kind of helps out as well. And, hopefully this podcast will become very informative for other people that are interested in starting their business, or, you've been in this game for a long time and you're just looking to take something off your plate. Or, you're looking to hand off and you're looking for an educational component as well. There's a lot of benefits that you get, it sounds like, for utilizing Fairbuild and just learning and taking things off your plate. So I really appreciate your time.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, Rusty.
You're very welcome. Just stay on for a little bit after I hit the stop record so that it can continue to upload. You'll see a percentage go, and then we'll go from there. All right. Perfect. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.